this is not the video that I meant to put out this week. And I've actually heard other YouTubers say the same thing at the beginning of their videos, so I'm not being original here or anything. I actually have recorded a video, and I've been really bad about posting on this channel lately, but I posted a video, or I recorded a video about how now that the channel's hit around 800,000 subscribers, things are starting to change and be a little bit different. And I was asking the question, am I officially a celebrity? And basically talk about how I'm going through this weird new phase, and this is all kind of strange and new to me, and I'm thankful for it, but it's also weird, and the adjustment. And then, all this stuff started happening with the protests and the riots and the police brutality and whatnot. And so, suddenly didn't seem appropriate at all. There's been a lot of images coming out of these protests, not all easy to look at, some disturbing, some just generally make you sad. But some of the more uplifting ones that I've seen involve kneeling. There have been cops that have come out to some of these protests, and instead of firing on the crowd and using tear gas, they come out and they take a knee and they sit with them and they say, listen, we're here to listen to you, and we're here to protect you while you engage in your constitutionally, protected freedom of speech. And usually in those cases, they end in hugs. I've seen some videos like that where the cop gets down there, the cop takes a knee, and then a whole crowd of protesters, they take a knee and they talk and they listen. And when it's all said and done, the protesters come up and they hug the cops. And then in other places, they just fire on the crowd with rubber bullets in an inappropriate way. That's not the way you're supposed to use rubber bullets, and tear gas. And what do you know? Things escalate when you do that. The kneeling, of course, is reflective of what Colin Kaepernick was doing, which cost him his job. And the reason he stated that he was doing that was because he wanted to draw attention to police brutality, the issue of police brutality and systemic racism. And, of course, people from a certain segment of the media just applied their own meaning to it and said, no, you're disrespecting the flag, you're disrespecting the troops. And then he's like, no, I never said anything about the troops. I'm trying to draw attention to, police brutality. No, you're disrespecting the flag, you're disrespecting the troops. So they weren't listening to him. And the thing is, the whole kneeling thing, the taking a knee, I did some team sports back in school. I played basketball, that much football, which basically means I showed up for practice and then stood on the sideline, which was totally the right call by my coach. But I played enough team sports to know that take a knee means something special in team sports. When a coach calls the team around and says, all right, everybody take a knee, that's when it's time to listen. That's when he really wants your attention. That's when he really wants to impart some real, wisdom to you. He or she. That's time to put everything aside and listen to this piece of information, because this is important. So when Kaepernick's taking a knee, again, as somebody who plays team sports, it had that extra meaning to it. It wasn't just, I'm going to call attention to all this. It also meant we need to be listening. And the irony is that people weren't listening to him. They were applying their own meaning to what he was trying to say and never heard the message. And so now all of this is going on, and, I didn't want to put out the video that I had already planned on putting out because it just wasn't appropriate. Felt very tone deaf and like I'm living on some plane of reality that's different from everybody else, to not acknowledge what's going on. And I do have a decent platform at this point, and I want to do good things with it and support things that are, worthy of supporting. And I've had a lot of people ask me to talk about this in some way, because I'm now in a position where people want to hear what I think about things. And I'm very thankful for that. But I'm pretty sure that another white guy talking about how this has affected him or what he's going through is not really what the world needs right now. I think it's time to listen. And so that's what I've been trying to do. And it's kind of put me in a weird position because it's like, yes, like I just said, I want to do a video where I talk about this in some way, but it shouldn't be about me. I feel a general sadness about what's going on. And of course, the deaths that have been taking place, George Floyd, Eamon Asbury, Breonna Taylor, these are horrible. And I'm right there along with everybody else, but this isn't about me. It's not time to listen to me. It's time to listen to other people. So I wanted to take this opportunity and use this platform in some small way to amplify the voices of people who are actually affected by systemic racism, by police brutality, by this situation that we're living in. It doesn't affect me in the way that it affects them. So what I did, and I don't know if this is the right thing to do, but I've seen posts that basically say, you don't have to be a perfect ally, just be an ally. But I went on Twitter the other day and I basically asked a question. I wrote, serious question for my black friends and viewers. What's something you wish more white people understood about the experience of being a person of color? And I made the note that this could end up in a video. So here you go. I'm a person of my word. So I got a lot of responses and I wanted to just read those without any of my own commentary. Plenty of people were commenting on Twitter. I'll get to that in a minute. But I wanted to put those voices out there. This isn't a huge gesture. There's other things that I could be doing. There's things that I'm working on doing, but that's for me. And but I wanted to do this and just put it out and start a conversation. So here it goes. Frank McWright wrote, many things that all funnel back to our history. Being afraid of rogue cops, literally having white people run from me, seeing less opportunities in the workplace, seeing bad behavior by white individuals get ignored but seen as unacceptable if it's a person of color. Larry Walker said, what it's like to walk into a room or an elevator or even walking down a street and feeling another person staring at you as if you're guilty of some unknown crime. Xavier wrote, I wish people would stop calling us black people or person of color. I wish people just call us person and people. Kev wrote, the fact that every time I see a cop on the road at night, I fear getting pulled over and getting told to give them my ID. I can't even reach for my wallet in front of a cop because I'm afraid they'll think I'm threatening. Rob Muhammad said, when I went to see you and Ben Sullins and Everyday Astronaut in San Diego, I was super excited to associate with a community of like-minded people, and it was a great night. At the end of it, when we all took a group photo, I realized I was one of 2 black people there. Realizing I personally have made it far to become an officer in the Navy, a Halo pilot, privileged enough to own a Tesla and worry about existential questions, but being weighed down by the fact that I also have to represent the entirety of blacks whenever I'm in a room. At Lemonade Bay wrote, as a black person, I want to know why are history books praising these conqueror and conquistadors and wish they would be blunt and honest about it. T-Dog said that it saddens us to explain to our children the atrocities our people suffered over the years and also explain that they might experience that hate someday. Skeptic Tank wrote that people of color don't need saving, that we need the same opportunities to prove our worth, and that our words and actions weigh as much as the next Joe. My experience from working with mostly white individuals is there's always an underlying messianic complex among them. Orthodox Black wrote, for starters, black and POC are not the same. When you're speaking about black experiences and black voices, you should address them as such or the message gets lost or shirked onto someone else. Taylor Price wrote, microaggressions, especially for black women. Comments on your hair, voice, weight, etc. just come off different. While often not the intent to harm, there's impact because of history or stereotypes. She went on to say, also genuinely being fearful when a loved one leaves the house. I ask my partner to text or call every time they go for a run or are driving home to work late. Text me when you get home has a deeper meaning than just I'm checking up on you. It's truly about safety. Most importantly, it's hard for us to put into words the answer to questions like this because of the generational system. Much of what we do to get by, even stay alive, is what's learned from grandparents and then taught to kids for survival. White people are afforded the luxury of not having to teach their kids about the system or to not see color, but black people have no choice. Jamal Pernsley said, starting at an early age, it's clear that you are perceived and treated differently than your white peers. Having to constantly code switch and adjust how you operate in white spaces, all the while knowing you'll never have the opportunity your white peers have. It wears you down. Jace wrote, honestly, I just want to be safe and not fear losing my life. I'm 6'5" and people look at me like I'm a threat. I'm just existing like everyone else. Christian LaCour wrote, being a black mother to black children is one of the hardest things on the planet, and it shouldn't be. Toby, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce the last name, I'm sorry, says, I think white people might need to understand that the amount of hate black people went through, all because they're black in the past and in the present, is still haunting us today. So it'll take a collective societal effort to clear off the lack of trust being between the different races. And James Cruz wrote, having to have the talk with your kids about how they are to react when stopped by an officer, because you understand that the wrong reaction could mean your child doesn't make it home. My parents had to tell me, and I will one day have to tell my son. So a lot of these reflect what I've heard from friends of mine and people that I've known over the years in their experiences going through life as a black person. And I can honestly say I don't have to worry about any of that. I've never had to worry about the things that they are saying in those comments. And I mean, that's the definition of white privilege. That's what it is. I think white people get really... They have their own interpretation of the term white privilege, to take it to mean that they think that it's saying that they've never had to work for anything before, or that life is super easy for them. You know, I've got my own problems. My life isn't perfect, but I don't have those problems. And those are, I would say, more significant problems in a lot of ways than the things that I deal with. So I want to, before I go any further, I want to thank everybody who left those comments. And I hope you're okay with me using your names right there. I did say that it could wind up on a video, so I put that disclaimer there. I want to thank you for sharing your voices. And I hope that me being able to put this in a venue where more people can hear it makes some small difference. I will say that there were several things that were said, even in some of them that I just read, that I really had to hold back. Responding to it in some way, or sharing my own perspective on it in some way, both on Twitter and here right now. It's kind of a challenge making a video where I'm really trying hard to keep my perspective in check, because that's not the point. The point is to listen right now. So I wanted to just put those out there without commentary. Now, that did not stop other people on Twitter from doing exactly that. There were a lot of white people on there that were responding and making sure that they put their perspective on there. And of course there was, because Twitter, multiple threads of sniping and anger and fighting between people, with only maybe one or two exceptions that I can think of. It was all white people. And I just, and many of them were well-intentioned and were like fighting, back against, the people that were saying things I didn't like and whatnot. But the point is, you're kind of making this whole thing about you, and that's the point. This is a time to stop and listen and take a knee. So that's what I'm trying to do. There's a lot of black content creators, black authors, that have been talking about these issues for years, far more eloquently than I could ever hope to achieve. Ta-Nehisi Coates comes to mind. I've read a few of his books. He's a fantastic writer. A book that I read earlier this year, it was actually written by a white woman, but she runs diversity programs for corporations, and over decades has seen the way white people respond to discussions around race. And the book is called White Fragility. It's worth reading. A big takeaway I took from that book was that white people, we don't think of ourselves. There's a couple of things that came out of that book. White people don't think of ourselves as being part of a race. We don't think of ourselves in terms of race at all. To us, this is normal. And it's other people that are, part of a race. So whenever you talk about race issues or try to speak about, the white people in terms of race, that just like, there's a discongruity there that just, it's hard to put into words. And, this sentiment comes out from time to time. I remember back in LA in the early 90s, I think this is pre the Rodney King riots, one of the police commissioners there, he said something to the effect of that black kids deserve all the opportunities that normal kids have, or something like that. And the joke that came out of that was the people started calling the cop cars, instead of calling them the black and whites, because they're black and white. They started calling them the black and normals. But the other thing that came out of the book, and this is something I've seen quite a bit, actually, in everything that's going on right now, is that we think of racism as like this very specific, violent thing. When we think racism, we think white hoods, we think burning crosses, like the overt stuff. But there's also institutional, systemic, societal racism that is just so there and commonplace that we all grew up around, and it's in us whether we want it to be or not. So when you point to a white person that they've done something that has a tinge of racism on it, their immediate reaction is to assume that you're saying that you're burning a cross in their yard or something, and they get just super offended by it. And that's kind of what white fragility is all about. What needs to happen for a white person is to accept that, yeah, there's some of it in there. I have my prejudices. I'm not perfect, and I've had moments where a thought has come to mind, and then I'm like, ew, that was in there? That's horrible. But you have to be able to acknowledge that it's there before you can change it. And we get so busy being defensive and protecting our identities and our sense of self that we ignore the stuff that we need to shine a light on. And that's what this listening is all about. I have a very specific perspective in this world. I'm a white dude, straight, cis. I don't know what it's like to be a woman. That's like 50% of the population. I don't know what it's like to be any other race, which is most of the population of the world. I grew up in a small town. I have no idea what it's like to grow up in a city. I have one sister. I don't know what it's like to have a brother. I'm the youngest child. I don't know what it's like to be an older child or a middle child or have multiple siblings. My parents were married and they divorced when I was an adult, but I don't know what it's like to come up in a broken household. I don't know what it's like to not have any parents. I mean, I have a single, very specific perspective on the world, and the only way that I can learn what other people's perspectives are is to listen. Not talk, listen. At the end of all my videos, I have a standard closing line. And I'm sure if you're watching this and you follow this channel, I'm sure you've heard this a million times. But I say, thanks a lot for watching. You guys go out there, have an eye-opening week, and I'll see you next Monday. Love you guys. Take care. And the love you guys take care thing, I don't know why I do the peace sign. It just feels right. So the love you guys bit, I get a lot of people telling me how much that affects them. There's just something about saying that and hearing somebody say it to you. And to be honest, I stole it. I took it from a guy named Dean Lewis. I took stand-up comedy lessons from him, and he said that at the end of every class. And I remember just kind of being like, oh, that's nice, And I just remember having that feeling, and I wanted to pass that on. I thought that was a very powerful, simple but powerful statement. And I'm glad that it affects people in that way, because that's the point. But there's the bit right before that, have an eye-opening week. That might be the more important message that I want to leave everybody with all my videos. We all have an incredibly specific perspective on the world that comes from the very specific experience that we've had in our lives. And the best thing we can do is be aware and open our eyes both to science. Obviously, I talk a lot about that. Our own psychology, our own failings, getting past your ego, getting past your sense of self and your identity, and pushing through that. It's not always fun. It's not always easy. It's usually painful. And facing something so that you can grow and be better. And like I said at the beginning of this, I'm probably not a perfect ally. And in fact, there were multiple people on there that said that when I said people of color, that's probably not an appropriate word to use. And then there was, debates back and forth on that. So I don't know. I'm going to make mistakes, and maybe that was a mistake. Maybe even asking this question was a mistake. I've heard people say like the last Like it's not black people's job to teach us what racism is. I get that, but all I can do is try to be better and grow and listen. And that's all I can ask of everybody else too. One last thing I'll add regarding the protest specifically is that there was a picture that I saw, and if I can find it, I'll put it up on the screen. But there was a picture I saw of somebody holding a sign that mostly reflected how I feel about it. And the sign said, I can't believe we're still protesting this shit. And I talk a lot about how I've gotten older and I've seen things repeat themselves over and over and over again. And this is one of them. I referenced the Rodney King riots a little bit ago. I mean, that was 92. That was almost 30 years ago. And we're still seeing this. And it's frustrating that this problem is still a problem, but it's also a little frustrating for me. And I know this is a little bit against the grain here, but protesting is fine. We should protest, but it needs to be more than that. Like, we keep protesting and it keeps happening. So I don't think this is really solving the problem. We can't just constantly react to this happening. We have to be proactive. All politics is local. A buddy of mine called me out when he said, I was talking politics with him one time and he was like, "Who's your city councilor?" And I was going, and I couldn't think of her name. And he was like, "Yeah, then you don't get to talk about politics. If you're not involved in your city council, if you've never even gone down and, sat in on a meeting, then your voice doesn't count. Like, you're not there. You're not showing up." And I was like, wow, you're right. He totally busted me on that. And that's something I'm trying to work on. But the point is, we can't just keep responding to this and reacting to this. We have to be a presence. And if you can't personally be a presence, support groups that are a presence in local elections, in local city council chambers, in mayoral offices, people who are there all the time pressing these issues. And look, I'm a systems guy. I don't think that racism is ever going to completely go away, because there's always going to be this need for people to find somebody else to put lower than them so that they feel better about themselves. That's always going to be there. Can't get rid of it. That's my take on it. We can work on it as much as we can, and we should do that. But ultimately, it's always going to be there. So what you need is a system in place so that those worse angels or demons, whatever you want to call them, don't have a chance to rise to the surface and, end people's lives and whatnot. So, push for things like police officers that are required to live in the neighborhoods that they patrol. There's a name for that, and somebody's going to call me out in the comments for it. But, there's something that happens when it's your neighborhood that you're protecting. And in some cities, we've seen positive results when policies like that were enacted. Demilitarizing the police. There's no reason for policemen to have tanks. It's just too much. Having independent bureaus that monitor issues of police excessive use of force. I could go on and on. There's a million different things, and I'll put links in the description to other things like that. But we need to put the systems in place, and the only way to get those systems changed is to show up. Not after it happens, until the outrage dies down, but show up constantly. That's something I've been horrible about. If there's something you believe in, you need to get involved and show up and push for these things and support constantly, persistently. That's how these things get changed. Not by reacting, although the reactions are necessary, but by persistently going after it. Okay, the preaching's done. Anyway, I'll just close this by saying, if you're out there protesting, please be safe. And there's a million different ways that you can get involved that don't involve being shot at with tear gas. Again, I'll put some links down there, and I intend to do more of that as well myself. And last but not least, again, it's time to listen. It's time to take a knee and listen. So that's what I encourage us all to do. With that, maybe I'll be able to put out a normal video next time and the world won't be falling apart. There's always hope. I hope you all are doing well. Love you guys. Take care of yourselves. Peace.